The morning fog clung to the cobblestones of London like a shroud, muffling the clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the distant cries of newspaper boys. Edwin Blackwell barely noticed the damp seeping through his boots as he hurried down the narrow alley toward his workshop, his breath curling in the air before him. His mind was elsewhere, fixed on the calculations he had left unfinished the night before. The delicate brass components of his latest contraption spread across the workbench like the entrails of some mechanical beast. The workshop was his sanctuary, a cramped but orderly space tucked between a butcher's shop and a derelict tenement. Shelves groaned under the weight of gears, coiled springs, and half-assembled devices, their purposes known only to Edwin. A single gas lamp flickered above his desk, casting long shadows that danced across the walls like specters. He shrugged off his overcoat, the wool heavy with moisture, and reached for his magnifying glass. Then he saw it. A package, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, rested on his workbench. No postmark, no address, just his name, Edwin Blackwell, written in a precise, unfamiliar hand. He frowned. He hadn't ordered any parts, and no one but his assistant Eleanor ever left anything for him here. His fingers worked at the knot, the twine snapping with a dry whisper. The paper fell away to reveal a brass cylinder, its surface etched with strange looping engravings that seemed to shift under the lamplight. A mechanism at one end hissed faintly as he turned it in his hands. Then it opened. A single sheet of paper slid into his palm. The handwriting was immaculate, the ink an odd shade of blue-black that shimmered faintly. "Dear Mr. Blackwell, if you are reading this, the device has worked. I pray it finds you before the 11th of September 1893, for what follows is a matter of life and death, not just yours but countless others. You must abandon your work on the chronoresonance device. I know you believe it to be a mere theoretical curiosity, but in my time, its consequences have already unraveled the fabric of history. The fractures began in your workshop, they end with fire and ruin. I cannot say more yet, for fear of altering events prematurely, but know this, Sir Alistair Graves is not the ally he pretends to be. Do not trust him with your designs. Look to the Northern Star tonight. You will know this is no forgery. Yours in desperate hope, KB." Edwin's hands trembled. The letter was dated September 12, 2024. A joke then. A cruel one. He had no patience for spiritualist nonsense. The city was full of charlatans peddling ghost stories and fake mediums. Yet, the phrasing was odd. Chrono-resonance device. He had never spoken that term aloud. It was a private name, scribbled only in the margins of his note. A knock at the door startled him. He crumpled the letter into his pocket just as Eleanor stepped inside, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell," she said, unwinding her scarf. "You look as though you've seen a ghost." He forced a laugh. "Only the remnants of a bad supper." Eleanor raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She was used to his moods. At 23 she was sharper than half the engineers at the Royal Society, and the only person he trusted to handle his work. She set down a bundle of fresh tools and a newspaper. "Graves' men were asking after you again," she said casually, too casually. Edwin stiffened. What did they want? "Same as last time. Progress reports." She mimicked the nasally tone of Graves' secretary. "I told them you'd send word when there was something worth reporting." He exhaled. Graves had been hounding him for months, offering patronage in exchange for a share of his inventions. The man was a vulture, circling the moment Edwin's debts outweighed his pride. Eleanor glanced at the brass cylinder. "New acquisition, an odd delivery," he muttered. "No return address." She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. Strange craftsmanship, almost like it's... Her thumb brushed a hidden catch. A faint hum filled the room, and for an instant, the gas lamp flared blue. Then silence. Edwin snatched it back. "Don't touch it." Eleanor blinked. "What is that thing?" He hesitated. "I don't know yet." That night, Edwin stood at his window. The letter spread before him. The Northern Star, Polaris, glimmered through the smog. As he watched, a streak of light, too fast to be a shooting star, flashed beneath it, then vanished. Coincidence? It had to be. But then his gaze fell on the last line of the letter. "You will know this is no forgery." And in the alley below, a figure in a long coat stood motionless, watching his window. The man's clothes were wrong, the cut too sharp, the fabric too smooth, as if he'd stepped out of another century. The rain came down in sheets, rattling against the window panes of Edwin Blackwell's dimly lit study, like impatient fingers demanding entry. The gas lamps flickered, their glow barely holding back the pressing darkness as he hunched over his desk. The mysterious letter from the future spread before him. The words had not changed, yet they seemed to shift in meaning each time he read them, as though the ink itself were alive with implication. He had not slept. The figure in the alley, the man with the strange coat, had vanished before Edwin could call out, leaving only a lingering sense of unease. Now, with dawn still hours away, the weight of the letter pressed upon him like a physical thing. Chrono-resonance device, Sir Alistair Gray, fire and ruin. A log collapsed in the fireplace with a soft thud, sending up a shower of sparks. Edwin rubbed his eyes. Perhaps he was losing his mind. Perhaps the years of isolation, the endless tinkering in the dark, had finally unmoored him from reason. Then came the knock. Not at the door but at the window. 3 sharp taps, deliberate, unhurried. Edwin's breath caught. His lodgings were on the 2nd floor. Slowly he turned. A boy, no older than 12, crouched on the narrow ledge outside, his face pressed against the glass. His clothes were soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead. In one grimy hand, he clutched a folded paper, sealed with a splotch of red wax. For a moment, Edwin could only stare. Then instinct took over. He wrenched the window open, the cold wind and rain lashing inward. The urchin tumbled inside, landing on the rug, with a wet thump. Bloody hell, the boy gasped, shaking water from his sleeves like a dog. Ain't you got a doorbell? Edwin grabbed him by the collar. Who sent you? The boy's eyes widened. He thrust the letter forward like a shield. Gentleman paid me a crown to bring this straight to you. Said you'd give me another if I didn't dawdle. Edwin released him, snatching the letter. The wax bore no crest, only the imprint of a thumb. He broke it with a snap. Inside was another letter, same handwriting, same odd ink, and a newspaper clipping. The headline made his stomach drop. Renowned temporal physicist, Edwin Blackwell dies at 78. Beneath it, a date, March 15. The obituary spoke of his groundbreaking work in chrono-resonance theory, his tragic disappearance in 1893, and most unnerving, his posthumous influence on the so-called Blackwell paradox, a temporal anomaly still under study by the Chronos Institute. The boy cleared his throat. My crown, mister. Edwin barely heard him. His eyes raced over the accompanying letter. You doubt me still. I understand, but ask yourself, how could a forger know of your daughter's name? You never spoke of her, not even to Eleanor. Her grave is in Highgate, beneath the oak. The stone reads only Lillian. Tonight, graves will send men to steal your notes. Do not be there. Burn this after reading. KB. A roar filled Edwin's ears. No one knew of Lillian. No one. The child had drawn but a single breath before slipping away, her tiny form buried in secrecy to spare his wife the scandal. His wife, who had followed their daughter to the grave within the year. He had never told a soul. The boy took a step back. Mister, you've gone white as a sheet. Edwin fumbled in his pocket, thrusting a coin at the child without looking. Who gave you this? Describe him. Dunno. Fancy sort. Odd clothes, like a doctor's coat, but all black. Talked funny too. Said you'd have questions. The boy hesitated. Also said to tell you, the pendulum swings both ways. Whatever that means. The phrase struck Edwin like a blow. It was from an old notebook, a private musing on temporal mechanics. Did he say where he was going? The boy shrugged. Paid me extra not to follow him. He pocketed the coin and edged toward the window. You all right, mister? Edwin wasn't. The walls of the room seemed to pulse, the very air thick with impossibility. He managed a nod. The boy vanished into the storm as suddenly as he'd appeared. Eleanor arrived at dawn, finding Edwin amid a chaos of scattered papers and hastily packed crates. What in God's name are you doing? She demanded, shaking rain from her cloak. He didn't look up. We're leaving. Leaving. She stepped over a pile of books, her brow furrowed. The workshop is no longer safe. He thrust the newspaper clipping into her hands. Read that. She scanned it, her lips moving silently. Then she laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. This is absurd. Someone's playing a cruel joke. Then explain this. He showed her the second letter. Her laughter died as she reached the mention of Lillian. When she looked up, her eyes were wide. Edwin, how could anyone know? I don't know. He slammed a crate shut, but I intend to find out. A noise from the street below made them both freeze. The crunch of boots on gravel, the murmur of voices, too many voices. Eleanor darted to the window. Graves' men, 4 of them. Edwin's blood ran cold, just as the letter had warned. He grabbed Eleanor's arm, out the back. Now, they fled into the alley as the front door splintered behind them. Hours later, hidden in a rented room above a disused print shop, Edwin spread the letters side by side. The obituary had mentioned the Kronos Institute. The brass cylinder bore the same name, but with a different. Eleanor traced the engraving with her finger. If this is real, if someone truly has found a way to send messages through time, then everything we understand is wrong. Edwin finished. A knock at the door. They froze. No one knew they were here. The knock came again, louder this time. Edwin reached for the pistol in his desk drawer. Then a voice called through the wood, low and urgent. Blackwell, open up, man, before Graves' hounds catch my scent. Edwin knew that voice. It belonged to Professor Ignatius Fowler, a colleague he hadn't seen in years, a colleague who had died 6 months ago. The brass doorknob turned before Edwin could reach it. The door swung open, and a gust of rain-scented wind rushed into the cramped safe house, carrying with it the unmistakable figure of Professor Ignatius Fowler, alive, drenched, and clutching a leather satchel to his chest, as though it contained the last embers of a dying fire. Eleanor gasped. Edwin's pistol remained leveled, his finger tense against the trigger. You're dead, Edwin said, his voice hollow. Fowler wiped rainwater from his spectacles with a trembling hand. His coat was singed at the edges, his left sleeve torn to reveal a fresh, jagged wound. Yes, well, he wheezed. I've found that to be a temporary condition of late. He staggered forward, and Edwin instinctively caught him before he collapsed. The satchel slipped from Fowler's grip, hitting the floorboards with a metallic clang. Eleanor locked the door behind him, her hands shaking. We attended your funeral. A premature affair, as it turns out. Fowler slumped into a chair, his breath ragged. Though I suspect the next one will stick. Edwin knelt beside the satchel, flipping open the clasp. Inside lay a mess of wires, glass vials, and a familiar brass cylinder, identical to the one he'd received, save for a series of fresh scorch marks along its side. You've seen these before, Fowler said, watching Edwin's face. Too recently for comfort. Edwin held up the cylinder. Who gave this to you? Fowler's smile was grim. A man who shouldn't exist, just like the letter you received, the one warning you about Graves. A chill prickled Edwin's neck. How do you know about that? Because, Fowler said, pulling back his sleeve to reveal a strange symbol branded into his flesh, a looping serpentine design that matched the engravings on the cylinder. I've been helping our mysterious correspondent, and we're running out of time. The docks at midnight. The Thames smelled of rotting fish and coal smoke, the fog so thick, Edwin could barely see Eleanor's silhouette ahead of him. Fowler led them through a maze of crumbling warehouses, his breath visible in the cold air. Here, Fowler whispered, stopping before a rusted iron door marked with the same serpentine symbol from his arm. Edwin's pulse quickened. What is this place? Fowler didn't answer. He pressed his palm against the door, and with a groan of protesting metal, it swung open. Inside, the air hummed. Crates lined the walls, each stamped with the same insignia, Kronos Institute, Tuumwak. Some were shattered, their contents strange glass orbs, bundles of copper wire, half-melted devices spilling out like entrails. Eleanor lifted one of the orbs. Inside, a faint blue light pulsed. My God. Fowler moved to the far wall where a metal box the size of a coffin stood upright. This is what Graves is after. Edwin stepped closer. The box was covered in dials and switches, none of which made sense. Some were marked in symbols he'd never seen, others in what looked like Latin, but twisted, as though the words themselves had decayed over centuries. Fowler placed his hand on the lid. They call it the a way to stabilize time fractures. Our friend from the future has been smuggling these back, trying to undo the damage Graves will cause. Edwin's mind reeled. Damage? Fowler opened the box. Inside lay a corpse. Not just any corpse. Fowler's corpse. Same spectacles, same singed coat, same wound on the arm. Eleanor staggered back, clapping a hand over her mouth. Edwin's voice was barely a whisper. What the hell is this? Fowler, the living one, swallowed hard. Proof that time is already unraveling. He pointed to the dead man's hand, where a scrap of paper was clutched in stiff fingers. Read it. Edwin pried the note free. The handwriting was his own. If you're seeing this, Fowler is dead. Graves has the teth. Find the ship called Argentum before dawn, or the fracture will consume us all. A shout echoed from outside. Torchlight flickered through the broken windows. Graves' men. Fowler grabbed Edwin's arm. They're here for the box. If they take it. A gunshot cracked through the night. Fowler jerked, a bloom of red spreading across his chest. Edwin barely had time to react before the room erupted into chaos. The fight and the fracture. Graves' men poured in like rats, their faces obscured by scarves and goggles. Edwin shoved Eleanor behind a crate as bullets tore through the air. Fowler was on his knees, blood dripping between his fingers. The Argentum, he gasped. Dock 7, go. Edwin snatched the satchel of devices, but as he turned to flee, the room shut. The air rippled like disturbed water. Crates flickered in and out of existence. One of Graves' men screamed as his arm twisted, bending at impossible angles before snapping back into place. Then with a sound like shattering glass, a rift opened in the center of the room, a jagged tear in reality itself. Through it, Edwin saw a city, but not London. Towers of gleaming metal stretched into a smoke-choked sky. Strange carriages moved without horses, and standing at the edge of the rift, a figure in a black coat watched him, his face obscured by a mask of polished brass. The figure raised a hand, not in greeting, but in warning. Then Graves' men were upon them. Edwin grabbed Eleanor and ran. Behind them, the rift snapped shut with a thunderclap, and Fowler's screams were cut short. The Argentum was not a ship, at least not anymore. Dock 7 loomed before Edwin and Eleanor like a graveyard of forgotten vessels, their hulls rotting in the brackish water. But the Argentum, what remained of it, was something else entirely. Its mast was shattered, its deck scorched black, and along its port side, the wood rippled, as though the ship were half submerged in an invisible current. Eleanor gripped Edwin's arm. That's not possible. The air around the ship hummed, a sound that vibrated in Edwin's teeth. He had seen this before in the warehouse, just before the rift opened. Time was breaking here. A figure moved on the deck. Edwin's breath caught. The man from the rift, the one in the brass mask, stood motionless, watching them. Then with a deliberate slowness, he raised his hand and pointed toward the ship's hold. A warning, an invitation. Edwin didn't have time to decide. Behind them, the clatter of boots on cobblestones sent them both ducking behind a stack of crates. Graves' men were spreading through the docks, lanterns swinging as they searched. We have to move, Edwin whispered. Eleanor's eyes flicked to the ship. Toward that. Do you have a better idea? She didn't. The boarding. The deck groaned underfoot, the wood unnaturally warm. The brass-masked figure was gone, but in his place, something worse. A corpse, in a future uniform. The body lay sprawled near the hatch, its clothing made of a strange shimmering fabric Edwin had never seen. The man's face was frozen in terror, his fingers clawed into the planks, as though he'd been trying to escape something. Eleanor turned away, gagging. This ship is cursed. Edwin crouched beside the body. No visible wounds, just emptiness, like the man had been drained from the inside out. Then he saw it. Clutched in the corpse's hand was another letter. Edwin pried it free. The paper was brittle. The ink faded, as though it had aged centuries in moment. If you are reading this, the tether has failed. Graves's experiment at Millbank will trigger the first fracture. You must stop him before midnight, or London will burn in a fire that never ends. The Argentum was our last anchor. Now it is yours. KB. Edwin's hands shook. Millbank. Graves's factory, the place where he'd been assembling Edwin's designs without his consent. A noise from below deck, metal scraping against metal. Then a voice, weak, broken, called out, Blackwell. Edwin knew that voice. Fowler. The hold, the lower decks were worse. Time had slipped here. Patches of the hull flickered between rotten wood and gleaming steel. A puddle of water on the floor reflected not the ceiling, but a starless sky. And in the center of it all, Fowler, or what was left of him, lay strapped to a makeshift table, wires snaking from his temples to a device that looked like a cross between a telegraph and a torture implement. He was alive, barely. Edwin. Fowler rasped, his eyes wide. You have to get out of here. Edwin rushed to him, tearing at the wires. What did they do to you? Fowler's laugh was a wet, broken thing. Not them. Me. The other me. The one from, he coughed, blood speckling his lips. From after. Eleanor paled. You're not our Fowler. The man on the table smiled grimly. No, I'm the one who lived. Then the ship lurched.
The walls groaned. The air itself seemed to tear, and for a heartbeat, Edwin saw a battlefield, smoke and fire. Men in strange uniforms, fighting not with rifles but with devices that made the air scream. Graves, older, wearing a crown of wires, standing before a machine that pulsed like a dying star. And Lillian, his Lillian, grown into a woman, shouting his name as the world came apart. Then it was gone. Fowler. The future. Fowler gripped Edwin's wrist with surprising strength. Listen carefully. Graves doesn't just want your machine. He wants you, your mind, your knowledge. He's been using the fractures to pull pieces of you from other times. Edwin recoiled. That's insane, is it? Fowler's eyes flicked to the corpse on the deck above. Then why do you remember things that never happened? Why do you wake up some days with scars you don't recall earning? Edwin's blood ran cold. He did have scars. A burn on his left palm, a slash across his ribs. He'd always assumed he'd gotten them drunk. Fowler coughed again. The Argentum was supposed to stabilize the fractures. Now it's making them worse. You have to. A gunshot rang out. Fowler's head snapped back. Standing at the hatch, pistol smoking, was Sir Alistair Graves. "Ah, Blackwell," he said, smiling, just in time for the end of the world. The gunshot still echoed in Edwin's skull as Graves stepped into the hold, his polished boots crunching over broken glass that hadn't been there a moment before. The ship groaned around them, its timbers warping as reality itself seemed to fray at the edges. Graves' smile was a knife slash. In the gloom, "You really should stop digging, Blackwell. Some graves are meant to stay buried." Edwin barely heard him. His hands were sticky with Fowler's blood, his mind reeling from the dying man's last words. Pieces of you from other times, the scars, the memories that didn't fit, the nightmares of machines he'd never built. Eleanor was the first to move. She snatched up a rusted iron bar from the debris and swung it at Graves' head. Graves didn't flinch. The bar passed through him as if he were made of smoke before he solidified again with a laugh. "Oh, Miss Shaw, still playing the loyal hound." Edwin's breath caught. Not Graves. Not anymore. The man before them flickered like a poorly tuned magic lantern. One moment, the smug industrialist. The next, something older, a gaunt figure with veins of copper threading his temples. "You're from the future," Edwin whispered. Graves, or whatever wore his face, inclined his head. "And you're late for your own funeral." A tremor ran through the ship. The corpse of the future soldier twitched, his fingers curling as the air above him split open, a jagged wound in reality. Through it, Edwin saw the battlefield again. The screaming machines, the crowned Graves, standing triumphant, and Lillian, his Lillian, aiming a device at the rift. "Father," she shouted to him, "don't let it take you." Then Graves seized Edwin's throat. Enough theatrics. The thing wearing Graves snarled. Its fingers burned like brands, searing through Edwin's collar to the skin beneath. "You're coming to Millbank. The machine needs its architect." The world went white with pain. The fracture engine. Edwin woke strapped to a chair, his mouth tasting of ozone and blood. The room around him was both familiar and impossible. Graves' factory at Millbank. But wrong. The brick walls flickered between soot-stained Victorian stone and smooth white alloy. The ceiling arched into darkness one moment, then reflected the glow of floating lanterns the next. And in the center of it all, the machine, a nightmare of brass and lightning. Its core pulsed with a sickly green light. Wires snaked from it to chairs like Edwin's, each holding a different version of himself. One missing an eye, one with mechanical hands, one whose skin had fused with the chair in a grotesque weld of flesh and metal. The nearest Edwin turned his head. His lips were sewn shut with copper wire, but his eyes screamed, "Run!" Graves' voice echoed from everywhere at once. "Beautiful, isn't it? A symphony of you." The real Graves, the Victorian one, stood before the main console, his hands dancing across controls that hadn't been invented yet. Every fracture pulls another Blackwell through time. Every Blackwell makes the fractures wider, a self-sustaining loop. Until tonight, Edwin strained against his bonds. "Why?" Graves didn't look up. "Because in every future you're the one who stops me, but not this time." He flipped a switch. "This time I'll have all of you." The machine shrieked to life. Edwin's bones vibrated. His vision doubled, tripled. He was a boy in his father's workshop, watching gears turn. He was an old man in a ruined city, scribbling equations on a crumbling wall. He was Lillian's father, holding her for the first and last time. The other Edwins screamed as one. Then the wall exploded. Eleanor's gambit. Smoke billowed as Eleanor charged through the rubble. Fowler's satchel of future devices, strapped across her back. In her hands, she clutched the brass cylinder from the Argentum, its engravings now glowing blue-hot. Graves, snarl, you wretched girl. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She smashed the cylinder into the machine's core. The explosion was silent. For one heartbeat, the world unfolded. Edwin saw 1,000 Londons layered like pages in a book. Graves in every era, building his empire on stolen time. And Lillian, always Lillian, fighting back. Then the vision collapsed. The machine died with a whimper. The other Edwins blinked out, one by one, until only the original remained. Graves staggered back, his skin peeling away in patches to reveal the copper-faced creature beneath. No, the convergence was now. A gunshot rang out. Graves, behind him, standing in the ruined doorway, was the brass-masked figure from the rift, his coat smoldering, his weapon still raised. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the figure removed its mask. Edwin's heart stopped. It was Eleanor, older, hardened, but unmistakably. Hello, Edwin, future Eleanor said softly. We have a lot to talk about.
The air in the ruined factory still crackled with residual energy, the scent of burnt copper and ozone clinging to the rubble. Edwin stared at the woman before him, Eleanor, but not his Eleanor, her face lined with decades of war, her eyes holding a weight he couldn't fathom. His Eleanor, his young, brilliant assistant, stood frozen beside him, her knuckles white around the empty satchel. This is a trick, she whispered. Future Eleanor holstered her weapon, a sleek pistol-like device that hummed as it settled into its casing. No trick, she said. Her voice was rougher, but the cadence was the same. Just cause and effect. You activated the Argentum's failsafe. That was the signal I'd been waiting for. Edwin's mind raced, waiting for how long? Future Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. Longer than you'd believe. A groan from the floor cut through the tension. Graves, or what was left of him, twitched, his body flickering between his Victorian guise and the copper-skinned creature beneath. Future Eleanor drew her weapon again and put a single pulse of light through his skull. He didn't get back up. Young Eleanor made a choked sound. He wasn't human, future Eleanor said flatly. Not anymore. The Graves you knew died in 1895. What you've been dealing with is a hollow man, a puppet grown by the Kronos Institute to ensure their preferred timeline. She kicked the corpse's arm, revealing circuitry woven through the flesh. They've been planting these in key moments for centuries. Edwin's vision swam, the fractures, the visions, the other hymns. It was all connected. The machine, it was pulling versions of me from other times. Why? Future Eleanor exhaled. Because in every timeline, across every fracture, you're the one who stops them. She tapped her temple. Your mind, the way it sees time, not as a line but as a symphony. The Institute fears that, so they've been trying to harvest it. Young Eleanor stepped forward, her shock giving way to fury. And Lillian, the letters signed KB, that's her, isn't it? His daughter. A shadow crossed future Eleanor's face. Catherine Blackwell, my partner, the woman who's been sending those letters from 2021. She looked at Edwin. Your daughter lived in some timelines, and in those she fights. Edwin's knees nearly gave out. Lillian, alive, a fighter. The thought was too vast to hold. Future Eleanor checked a device on her wrist, a glowing band that showed shifting symbols. We have 6 hours before the next fracture opens. The Institute will send more hollow men. We need to. A sound cut her off, a heartbeat, but not from any of them. From the machine, the shattered core of Graves' device pulsed once, weakly, like a dying animal. Then the air above it ripped open, not a fracture this time, but a doorway, and through it stepped Lillian Blackwell. Not a vision, not a ghost. Real. She was older than the child Edwin had buried, perhaps 30, dressed in a coat of strange material, her dark hair streaked with silver. In her hands she held a device identical to future Eleanor's, her eyes locked onto Edwin's. Father, she breathed. Then the ceiling collapsed. The world erupted in noise and dust as the factory ceiling caved in. Edwin barely had time to register Lillian's outstretched hand before future Eleanor shoved him forward, shouting something lost in the roar of collapsing brick and mortar. Go. He moved on instinct, grabbing both Eleanor's, his young assistant and her battle-hardened future self. As Lillian's device emitted a piercing whine, a sphere of blue light enveloped them, just as the rubble would have crushed them. Reality itself bending around the shield. For a heartbeat, they stood suspended in silence, the chaos frozen around them. Then the light vanished, and they were elsewhere, the timeless place. The room was circular, walls lined with books that flickered between leather-bound tomes and sleek data tablets. A massive brass apparatus dominated the center, its gears turning in impossible directions, some forward, some backward, some in spirals that made Edwin's eyes water. Lillian lowered her device, her hands shaking. We're safe here, for now. Edwin couldn't speak. Up close, he could see her face, really see it, the curve of her nose, the stubborn set of her jaw, his features mirrored in her. She met his gaze, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I've waited my whole life to meet you. The words shattered him. Future Eleanor cleared her throat. We're in a fold, a pocket between moments. The Institute can't reach us here, but we can't stay long. The longer we do, the more unstable time becomes. Young Eleanor, still gripping Edwin's arm, looked between them all. So what now? We can't hide forever. Lillian reached into her coat and withdrew a final letter. The paper was yellowed, the edges frayed as if it had passed through countless hands across centuries. This, she said softly, is why I came. Edwin took it. The handwriting was his own. To whoever reads this, if time is a river, then the Kronos Institute seeks to dam it, but a river dammed becomes a flood. You must undo what they have done, destroy the machine, burn the letters, let time forget us. Some threads must never be pulled. E.B. Future Eleanor nodded. The paradox loop ends tonight. Graves is dead, the fracture engine is in ruins, but the Institute will keep coming, unless we erase their reason to exist. Edwin understood. We have to make it so none of this ever happened. Lillian's voice broke, including the weight of it crushed the air from Edwin's lungs. Lillian, alive, here, and now she had to vanish. Young Eleanor stepped forward. There has to be another way. There isn't, future Eleanor said. The only way to break the cycle is to never start it. No time machine, no letter, no fractures. She looked at Edwin. You have to go back and stop yourself. The choice. The brass apparatus whirred to life, its gears spinning faster. Lillian adjusted the controls, her fingers flying over keys that hadn't been invented yet. I can send you back, she said, to the moment before you opened the first letter. But once you're there, you'll forget all of this. Edwin's throat tightened. And you? Her smile was bittersweet. I'll still be out there, in the timelines that never were. Future Eleanor placed a hand on young Eleanor's shoulder. You'll forget too, but some part of you will remember enough to steer him away, to keep him from digging too deep. Edwin turned to Lillian. I can't. You already did, she whispered. In another life, you held me, you named me. That has to be enough. The machine reached a fever pitch, the air vibrating. Lillian reached out one last time and pressed her palm to Edwin's cheek. Goodbye, father. The world went white. Epilogue. The unwritten future. Edwin Blackwell woke at his desk, his head pillowed on blueprint. The gas lamp had burned low, casting long shadows. A knock at the door. Eleanor entered, her arms full of tools. You've been asleep for hours. Graves' men came by again. I told them you'd send word when. Edwin stood abruptly, his chair scraped. Something tugged at the edge of his mind, a dream slipping away. Blackwell.
Hello?
Eleanor frowned. Are you all right? He stared at his hands. A faint scar crossed his left palm, a burn he didn't remember earning. The words died in his throat. Then his eyes fell on the fireplace. A scrap of paper too thick, too smooth, caught in the grate, half burned. He knelt, pulling it free. Only 2 words remained legible. Burn everything. For a heartbeat, the shadows seemed to deepen. The gas lamp flickered. Then Edwin stood, tossed the paper into the flames, and watched it turn to ash. The end. The fire crackles low in the hearth. The last embers of Edwin Blackwell's strange journey fading to ash. The letters are burned. The machine is dismantled. London carries on, oblivious to the war that never was, the timelines that collapsed before they could be born. But time, like memory, leaves scars. If you walk through Highgate Cemetery at dusk, you might see it, a grave with no name, just a single word carved into weathered stone, Lillian. And if you listen closely, you might hear the whisper of gears turning in the dark, the faint hum of a device that shouldn't exist. Some secrets refuse to stay buried, and some letters are never meant to be read.